If you're over 70, or you're caring for someone who is, I want to ask you a question that sounds almost too simple to matter, but the answer might genuinely surprise you. How often should you actually be bathing? Not how often you were taught growing up. Not how often feels normal out of pure habit. How often does your body, at this particular stage of life, actually need? Because the answer, backed by dermatologists and senior care experts alike, is very different from what most of us assume, and getting it wrong in either direction can quietly put your health at risk. Today, I am going to walk you through 7 facts about bathing after 70 that most people have never heard. Some of them will surprise you. A few of them might even change how you or someone you love approaches this simple daily habit for good. I have spent a great deal of time listening to families wrestle with this exact question, sometimes without ever realizing it was a question worth asking in the first place. A daughter worried her father was letting himself go. A husband quietly frustrated that his wife no longer wanted her nightly bath the way she used to. An adult child, hundreds of miles away, wondering whether a parent living alone was still managing this most basic part of daily care. Almost none of these families had ever paused to ask what the right frequency actually should be at this stage of life, because none of us are ever really taught this. We simply carry forward the habits of our younger years, without questioning whether our aging bodies still need, or can still safely handle, exactly the same routine. Before we get into it, if conversations like this one, honest, practical, and focused on the real details of living well after 70, are useful to you, I would love for you to like this video and subscribe to Golden Wisdom. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need exactly this kind of guidance, and it costs you nothing but a single tap. Now, let's get into these 7 facts, starting with the one that surprises almost everyone. The first fact is this: you almost certainly do not need to bathe every single day, and for many people over 70, doing so may actually be doing more harm than good. This flies in the face of everything most of us were raised to believe, especially those of us taught that a daily bath or shower was simply what a clean, respectable person did without question. But senior care experts and organizations focused on aging health generally agree that bathing 2 to 3 times a week is enough to maintain proper hygiene for most older adults. On the days in between, a simple sponge bath focused on the face, underarms, and other areas prone to odor and bacteria can keep you fresh and clean without the need for a full bath or shower. I understand how strange this fact can feel at first. I remember my own mother, well into her 80s, insisting on her daily shower right up until her hip made it too dangerous to manage alone. When her doctor suggested cutting back to 3 times a week, she looked at him as though he had suggested something scandalous. But once she understood the reasoning behind it, which I am about to explain to you now, she came around, and she told me later that her skin had never felt better. I think part of why this fact feels so uncomfortable is generational. Many of the people watching this video were raised in decades when a daily bath was treated almost as a moral requirement, a sign of discipline and self-respect, rather than simply one option among several. Some of you may even remember, or have parents who remembered, a time when a single weekly bath was the norm for entire households, long before daily showers became the standard. Most of us grew up assuming was always correct. Our bodies, and our skin in particular, have not fundamentally changed since then. What has changed is our habits, and sometimes those habits outlive the reasoning behind them by decades. Which brings me to the second fact, and this one explains exactly why that first fact matters so much. As we age, our skin changes in ways that most of us never learn about until we experience the consequences firsthand. the outer layer of skin becomes thinner. The glands responsible for producing natural oils slow down considerably, and the skin's ability to retain moisture declines with each passing decade. The American Academy of Dermatology has found that over half of older adults experience skin dryness severe enough to cause noticeable itching or cracking. Daily bathing, especially with hot water and standard soap, strips away what little natural oil remains, leaving skin more vulnerable to dryness, irritation, and in some cases, painful cracking that can become a doorway for infection. This is not a small cosmetic concern. Cracked, damaged skin in someone over 70 is not the same minor annoyance it might have been at 30. It can become a genuine entry point for bacteria, leading to skin infections that are far more serious and far harder to treat in an older body with a slower healing process. So when I tell you that bathing less frequently might actually protect your health rather than compromise it, I want you to understand that this is not simply a matter of comfort or convenience. It is a matter of protecting the largest organ in your body from damage that becomes increasingly difficult to reverse the older we get. There is a simple habit worth adopting alongside this reduced bathing frequency, and it makes a genuine difference. Moisturize generously immediately after bathing, while the skin is still slightly damp, rather than waiting until it is fully dried. This helps trap whatever moisture remains on the surface of the skin, rather than allowing it to evaporate away entirely before the moisturizer is applied. A thick, fragrance-free cream tends to work better for aging skin than a thin, scented lotion, which can sometimes irritate skin that has already become more sensitive with age. This one small addition to a bathing routine, applying moisturizer within a few minutes of stepping out of the shower or tub, can meaningfully reduce the itching and cracking that so many older adults simply learn to accept as an unavoidable part of aging, when in truth, much of it can be prevented. The third fact is one that I think everyone over 70 and every single family member caring for someone over 70 needs to hear clearly, because it involves real physical danger. Bathrooms are, without question, one of the most dangerous rooms in the entire home for older adults, and the numbers behind this are more alarming than most people realize. A striking 66% of all bathroom injuries among older adults happen specifically in the shower or the tub. Wet tile, soap residue, the awkward motion of stepping over a tub wall. All of these combine to create a uniquely hazardous environment, one where a single moment of instability can lead to a fall. And a fall in your 70s, 80s, or beyond can mean a fractured hip, a hospital stay, and in some cases, the beginning of a much steeper decline in independence. This is exactly why reducing the frequency of full baths is not simply about skin health. Every single time you or a loved one steps into that shower or tub, you're taking on real physical risk. Bathing 2 to 3 times a week, rather than daily, does not just protect your skin. It meaningfully reduces the number of times each week you expose yourself to the single most dangerous room in your home. And on the days you do bathe, I want to encourage you strongly to use every safety tool available. A sturdy grab bar mounted securely into the wall, not simply suction cupped on. A non-slip mat on the floor of the tub or shower. A shower chair so that standing on wet tile for an extended period is no longer necessary at all. A handheld shower head so that you can sit and still clean yourself thoroughly without ever needing to stand beneath a fixed stream of water. These small additions cost very little, and they may very well prevent the single injury that changes everything. I want to share something a physical therapist once told me, because it reframed this entire issue in a way I have never forgotten. She said that the goal of bathing safety is not simply avoiding a fall in the moment. It is avoiding the fear that follows a near fall, because that fear itself becomes its own quiet danger. Once a person becomes afraid of their own bathroom, they often begin rushing through bathing, skipping steps, holding on to unstable surfaces like towel racks or soap dishes that were never designed to bear real weight, all in an effort to get the ordeal over with as quickly as possible. Ironically, this fear-driven rushing often creates more risk than the original concern ever did. Proper safety equipment does not just prevent falls. It restores a sense of calm and confidence to a routine that should never feel like something to survive. The fourth fact addresses the opposite concern, because I do not want anyone watching this to walk away thinking that less bathing is always better, without any nuance at all. Bathing too infrequently carries its own very real risks, and one of the most serious is a significantly increased chance of urinary tract infections. This might sound surprising, since we often think of urinary tract infections as an internal problem entirely separate from bathing habits. But poor hygiene, particularly in the genital area, allows bacteria to accumulate and travel more easily into the urinary tract, and older adults are already more vulnerable to these infections due to changes in bladder function and, for many, reduced mobility that makes thorough cleaning more difficult in the first place. What makes this fact particularly important is something many families do not realize. Urinary tract infections in older adults often do not present the way they do in younger people. Instead of a burning sensation or urgent need to urinate, a UTI in someone over 70 can show up as sudden confusion, agitation, or a noticeable change in behavior that families mistake for a cognitive decline or even the onset of dementia. I have heard from more than one family who rushed a loved one to the emergency room, terrified they were witnessing a sudden and permanent mental decline, only to discover it was a treatable urinary tract infection the entire time, one that proper hygiene might have prevented in the first place. This is exactly why the 2 to 3 times a week guideline includes thorough cleaning of these areas even between full baths, through careful spot cleaning with a warm washcloth. For anyone caring for someone managing incontinence, this fact deserves even closer attention. When accidents occur, cleaning should happen as soon as reasonably possible afterward, rather than waiting for the next scheduled bath, because prolonged contact between skin and moisture dramatically increases the risk of both skin breakdown and infection. Keeping a supply of gentle, fragrance-free wipes on hand for these moments, separate from the regular bathing schedule entirely, can make an enormous difference in preventing exactly the kind of infection we are discussing here. Which leads directly into the fifth fact, one that I think deserves far more attention than it usually receives. The days in between full baths are not days off from hygiene entirely. They are days for what caregivers and nurses often call spot cleaning, and doing this properly matters just as much as the full bath itself. This means taking a warm washcloth to the areas of the body most prone to bacteria, sweat, and odor. The face, to remove oils and any residue from the day. The underarms, which accumulate sweat regardless of how physically active a person remains. The groin area, particularly important for anyone managing incontinence or reduced mobility. And the feet, which are especially prone to fungal infections in older adults, particularly for anyone with diabetes or reduced circulation. I want to emphasize this because I think many families assume that skipping a full bath means skipping cleanliness altogether for that day, and that assumption is simply wrong and can lead to real hygiene problems over time. A few minutes with a warm washcloth, focused specifically on these areas, keeps a person genuinely clean and comfortable on the days a full bath is not scheduled, without any of the risks that come from overwashing delicate, aging skin every single day. The sixth fact involves something so simple that most people never think twice about it, and yet it can have a surprisingly serious impact on someone over 70. I am talking about water temperature. Many older adults, particularly those who grew up in an era before reliable home heating, gravitate toward very hot baths and showers, associating that intense heat with a truly thorough clean. But hot water poses two distinct dangers for an aging body that most people never consider. First, aging skin is thinner and more fragile, which means it is more easily burned or damaged by water temperatures that would have felt merely pleasant decades earlier. Many older adults experience some decline in the nerve sensitivity that would normally warn them. A temperature has become dangerously hot, meaning real burns can occur before the person even realizes the water has become too much for their skin to handle safely. Second, and this one surprises almost everyone I share it with, hot water can cause blood vessels near the surface of the skin to dilate significantly, which can lead to a sudden drop in blood pressure. For someone over 70, particularly anyone already managing blood pressure medication or cardiovascular concerns, this sudden drop can cause dizziness or even fainting, right there in the shower or tub, exactly the dangerous environment we discussed a few facts ago. Lukewarm water, rather than hot, is not simply gentler on aging skin. It may genuinely be safer for your heart and your balance as well. A simple, practical way to check this at home is to test the water against the inside of your wrist before stepping in, rather than relying on your hands alone, since the wrist tends to retain more of its sensitivity to temperature than fingers that have spent decades handling hot pans and dishwater without a second thought. If you are caring for a parent or spouse, consider setting the water heater itself to a slightly lower maximum temperature, which removes the guesswork entirely and protects against scalding, even if the tap is turned further than intended. Many home improvement stores sell simple anti-scald devices that attach directly to a shower head or faucet for very little cost. And for a household with anyone over 70, I consider this one of the smartest small investments a family can make. The seventh and final fact is the one I consider the most important of all, because it has nothing to do with the physical mechanics of bathing, and everything to do with something families frequently misunderstand entirely. When someone over 70 begins resisting bathing altogether, avoiding it far beyond what would be reasonably healthy, this is very rarely simply about laziness or stubbornness, whatever it might look like on the surface. It is often one of the earliest and most overlooked signs of something else entirely: depression, social isolation, cognitive changes, or physical pain that makes the process of bathing feel genuinely overwhelming rather than simply unpleasant. I think of a neighbor of mine, a proud, independent man who had lived alone since his wife passed, who slowly stopped bathing regularly over the course of several months. His daughter, visiting from out of state, assumed at first that he was simply becoming stubborn in his old age, resistant to a routine that had always mattered to him before. It was only after a concerned conversation with his doctor that the family discovered he had been quietly struggling with depression since his wife's death, and that his declining hygiene was one of the clearest outward signs of an internal struggle he had never voiced to anyone. Once his depression was properly addressed, with real support and treatment, his interest in his own care, including bathing, gradually returned as well. If you notice a sudden and significant change in someone's bathing habits, whether that is a parent, a spouse, or yourself, I want you to resist the urge to interpret it simply as stubbornness or a decline in standards. Consider instead whether pain, depression, isolation, or a change in cognitive function might be at the root of it. Sometimes the simplest, most overlooked daily habits tell us the most important things about how a person is truly doing, far beyond what they are willing or able to put into words themselves. This works both directions as well, and I think it deserves mention. Just as declining hygiene can signal an underlying struggle, a genuine improvement in bathing habits. Someone who begins caring for themselves again after a period of neglect can be one of the earliest and most encouraging signs that treatment for depression, or a change in living situation, or simply the return of a sense of purpose, is genuinely working. Caregivers and family members who pay close attention to this particular habit often notice recovery unfolding here before it becomes obvious anywhere else. Now that we have gone through all 7 of these facts together, I want to bring them back to something practical, something you can genuinely apply starting this very week. If you are over 70 or caring for someone who is, aim for a full bath or shower 2 to 3 times a week using lukewarm rather than hot water with every safety measure in place: a grab bar, a non-slip mat, a shower chair if standing for any length of time has become difficult. On the days in between, take a few minutes for thorough spot cleaning with a warm washcloth, focusing on the face, underarms, groin, and feet. Moisturize generously after every bath or shower while the skin is still slightly damp to help lock in whatever moisture remains. And pay attention, real attention, to any sudden changes in bathing habits, not as a matter of cleanliness alone, but as a genuine window into someone's physical and emotional well-being. I know a topic like bathing can feel almost too ordinary to spend this much time discussing, but I have come to believe, over many years of watching families navigate the realities of aging, that it is often the most ordinary habits, the ones we assume we already understand completely, that hold the most overlooked wisdom. Getting this one simple routine right, protecting fragile skin, respecting the real dangers of a wet bathroom floor, recognizing the emotional signals hidden inside a change in hygiene, can genuinely protect both the health and the dignity of someone you love, or your own health and dignity, for years longer than you might expect. I also want to leave you with this. There is no single correct answer that applies perfectly to every person watching this video. Someone managing incontinence may genuinely need more frequent cleaning than someone without that concern. Someone with very dry, fragile skin may need to bathe even less often than the general guideline suggests, relying more heavily on spot cleaning between full baths. Someone who remains highly active, gardening or exercising regularly well into their 80s, may reasonably need to bathe a bit more often than someone with a quieter daily routine. Use these 7 facts as a foundation, a starting point grounded in real expertise, and then adjust thoughtfully based on your own body, your own skin, and your own particular circumstances, ideally in conversation with your doctor if anything about your situation feels uncertain. If this video gave you something useful today, something you can genuinely put into practice this week, please take a moment to like it and subscribe to Golden Wisdom. We share honest, practical wisdom like this regularly, the kind of guidance that respects your experience and your intelligence rather than treating aging as something to fear or hide from. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and I will see you in the next one.